Well, the US Environmental Protection Agency has formally declared that greenhouse gases threaten public health. The declaration allows it to regulate carbon emission gases without needing extra legislation from Congress in cases where President Obama's plans to fight global warming have stalled. Well, it boosts the prospects of delegates at the UN's climate conference in Copenhagen reaching an agreement to supplant the current Kyoto deal to curb carbon emissions, which expires in 2012. And while UN officials are optimistic about the summit, some skeptics say they want more science and less politics. Well, let's cross live now to our correspondent, Laura Emmett, who's in Copenhagen now. Hello to you, Laura. So, what's on the climate on the second day of the conference?
Well, Kerry, as you can see, I brought my special Moscow coat, but actually I don't really need it. It's not that cold here. But as you say, it is the second day of the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference. That's going on about 4 kilometres away from where I am now. But we've come here for something a little bit different today, away from the hustle and bustle and the sort of circus-type atmosphere that seems to have taken over the conference centre where that summit's being held. Because today and tomorrow, there's a group of sceptics meeting here in Copenhagen in order to sort of counterbalance that main conference that's going on. And part of that group that's meeting has laid down the gauntlet to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the UN's Ban Ki-moon. And they're saying if you say that the world is warming because of man-made factors, then prove it. You say that the glaciers are melting, prove it. You say that the sea levels are going to rise, prove it using the science that you have come up with, and we will counter that with our science. Now, for more on the science behind climate change and all that involves, I'm joined by Professor Cliff Ollier. Thanks very much for coming. He's an expert on ice caps and glaciers from the University of Western Australia. Now, Professor Ollier, all around Copenhagen, I don't know if you've seen them yet, but there are red flashing lights, and they're supposed to represent the levels that the sea will reach if the UN's predictions come true. But you say that theory is flawed. Could you explain that for us?
Well, I think so, and this is really why I'm here. I haven't seen all these signs, but now, especially since the world's been getting cooler since '98, the big thrust is rising sea levels. That's the best scale around, and it is tied to the melting of ice caps in particular, and it's based, I believe, on a false model, which I think I can explain very simply. The idea put forward by the alarmists is that the glaciers slide down to the sea, slide on their belly, lubricated by meltwater. And if we make things warmer, we'll get more meltwater and they'll slide ever faster, and we can reach a tipping point and catastrophic meters and meters. Well, depending on who you're talking to, there have been 20 meters, there have been 2 meters. And this is, in fact, we can't calculate it, but it's not the way glaciers really work. And this is what I'm going to be talking about in our conference. The idea of the glacier sliding on its belly was invented in 1779, and in 1845 it was totally disproved, and they knew what they'd done and they understood it. And since then there have been many more advances, but the alarmists are sticking to this 1779 idea of sliding. There are 2 reasons why the ice caps of Greenland and Antarctica can't slide into the sea. And the simplest one to observe is that they're occupying basins over 1 kilometre deep. So they've got to move uphill. And they can only do this by the way we now know, by the viscous flow. The solid ice at the base of an ice cap can flow by a mechanism called creep. And creep depends on temperature. The nearer you are to melting point, the faster it will go, and on pressure. So it won't flow at all until there is enough pressure. And this brings us to the second point, which is that in the ice caps we now have all these beautiful cores going down 3 kilometres and more with the stratified snow, recording year by year in the gas bubbles the temperature and the CO2 concentration, and we have these marvellous results. But the significant thing is that those layers are still there. They go back in Greenland for 105,000 years, and in Antarctica to 760,000 years, with no melting at all. And it seems ridiculous to think after 760,000 years they're suddenly melting now. And of course, they're not. They are accumulating. Now, an ice cap has a budget. We accumulate snow, eventually it flows, and goes to the edge, and there it will melt or break off as an iceberg. So we have build-up and loss. And it takes an awful long time to go from the beginning to the end. We don't respond to the present-day climate. But when we get back to the glacier flow, it's even harder because we've got the weight of the ice, but most of it is stratified, and then it flows because of geothermal heat. It's the heat coming from under the earth. That isn't affected by sunshine, certainly not by carbon dioxide, and the whole mechanism of this glacier flow has nothing to do with the present-day temperature or carbon dioxide.
And just briefly, Professor Ollier, you first expressed opposition to the man-made climate change movement in the 80s.
Yeah.
How has the movement changed since then, would you say?
Has become much more polarized, violent perhaps, and science has less and less effect. The ads I've seen from the BBC are quite appalling. They have nothing to do with science at all, straight propaganda, and we have similar things in Australia. There is a movement now, it's a deliberate and organised movement, whereas it started off as a conflict between one group of scientists and another. Where it will end, I have no idea, but I'm still in it, but getting a little weary.
We're glad you're still here. Thank you very much for talking to RT today. That's all we've got time for just about from Copenhagen for the moment, but we will be at the Skeptics conference all day today, and we'll be talking to a variety of guests, so do keep it here on RT. Back to you, Kerry.
OK, Laura, you keep that Moscow coat with you. We'll speak to you live again a bit later.